So thank you all for joining us tonight. We're living in some crazy times, and for those of you who listened to the week seminar from a couple of weeks ago, we did talk about a lot of different things going on in the world and the markets, and it was all like a forecast of what Trump might do next. And I had all the best experts from Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan and BlackRock and Fidelity, and they all thought what he might do. And the truth is, nobody really knows what he might do next. And there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the markets as to what he might do with regards to tariffs and what he might do with regards to his immigration policy and the implications of all that and what it might have to do with interest rates and what it might have to do with inflation and what it might have to do with the market and the volatility and all that. And that is, all out there. And the point that's all very interesting, but this seminar is really about what to do about it. So what we're going to talk about today is, first of all, like it's really super hard to time the market. And this kind of shows you that even when you're investing at all-time highs, it still makes sense to invest. It kind of shows you that over a period of time, that even with all-time highs, you still do very well whether you're investing at an all-time high or investing on any day. So the point is, even though it's had a correction recently, it's still relatively expensive, but it still doesn't necessarily mean it's not a good time to invest. And this kind of shows you investing at an all-time high, going out 1 year, 3 year, and 5 years, you still can do very well. And don't be afraid of all-time highs. This is another seminar, things that shows you that as well. So again, it's just important to not, overthink this and kind of like try to time the market, because even investing when the market is high, it does make sense over a long period of time. That being said, this is an interesting slide that talks about thinking twice about chasing the biggest stocks. And, because really the market in the last few years has largely been driven by the Magnificent Seven stocks. And, those seven stocks are now, I think, over 30% of the S&P 500. So they're really a large driver of that. And it's somewhat concentrated. And this kind of shows you that thinking twice about chasing big stocks, that, these stocks do wonderfully, before, you know, before, you invest in them. And then afterwards, after that period of time, after joining the top 10, then they actually don't do quite as well after that. So it kind of shows you that you want to kind of, maybe not over concentrate in those things. So that's really what this is really showing over here. And I think this is a new slide that I added that I think is kind of interesting. And this is actually consistent, and we'll talk about this later. Like right now, not that we're really talking about the markets right now. I mean, the large cap growth, the Magnificent Seven type stocks, those are stocks which I wouldn't necessarily, over concentrate in now. I actually, several of the people I'm reading are saying that the mid cap stocks are actually medium-sized capitalization stocks are a better place to invest. This kind of shows you about trying to time the market, and it kind of shows you that it's really super hard to do that. And over a period of time, really buying and holding the market really does make the most sense. This is actually probably one of the more important slides that I have in here, because it kind of shows you like every one of these years, like everybody's ready to jump off a building when they see the market volatility. And it shows you that in most years, despite, and this is quite a mouthful of this, but it says despite an average intra-year drop of 14.1%, that means if the market, is down 14.1 in an average year, annual returns with 34 of 45 years. So that kind of shows you that even with like some downturns in the marketplace, the market many times ends up being positive. So again, it's early in the year. We've had a rough start to the market, and again, you don't want to lose too much when the market goes down. That's another thing we'll learn about soon. But don't freak out about short-term market fluctuations, because truthfully, the market going up and down is normal for that then too. So that's actually an important slide. I added this slide because I thought it was really interesting, because it kind of shows you like how many bear markets you've actually lived through. And I, for example, were born in 1960, And this kind of shows, this is actually a little old. It's 64 years right now. And I've lived through 14 bear markets, an average bear market of 4.4 years. But it kind of shows you like the S&P 500 at that point in time was at 58. I'm just checking on my phone now. The S&P 500 now is at currently 55.99. So just think about that, and we'll see more about that. That really over a long period of time, the stock market's did wonderfully, and even with all those bear markets, it still makes sense to invest in the market. Um, I kept this slide in here as well. This kind of showed you because a couple of years ago everybody was freaking out about epidemics and things like that, and it seemed like this was a new occurrence and all these things. But this is kind of brings it all in view. Like there's been so many of these epidemics over a period of time, and the markets reacted to them. The market went down at first, but ultimately over a period of time, the market did go up. And this, consistent with that, it shows you that. Can somebody turn off their Beverly? Can you just mute yourself, maybe? Um, uh, the panic attacks in the S&P 500. It kind of shows you here that even despite all these like terrible things that have happened, the tech bubble, the Iraq war, downgrades to the U.S. debt, all these horrible things, COVID, all these things that have happened, generally the market has gone up over all those periods of time. So again, everybody thinks that this time is different, but the market generally does well. And this is kind of like showing you like, and we'll look at this with a casino reference later. It kind of shows you that, if you would go to a casino and I told you had a slot machine that 74% of the time paid off, this is actually something that, makes sense, and 26% of the time it's negative. I like this because it kind of shows you like cute little bears and bigger bears and things like that. But it shows you like generally the market does have some small market fluctuations. This is why I do like some of those things which do offer like 10% downside protection, because generally this does cover most occurrences when the market is down. And if people can withstand those kind of that volatility, then they can do well. And this kind of shows you that when the market goes down, it does take a little bit of time for the market to correct from that. And this is actually one of the more important slides that we have in here. It kind of shows you that over 1 year period of time, the market is very, very volatile. It can make as much as 52% or lose as much as 37%. But over when you have a 60-40 portfolio, it's a lot less volatility in there. But then when you kind of go out like 5 years and you go out 10 years and you go out 20 years, the market generally does really well. So that's why, like, the market is a very scary thing on a day-to-day and month-to-month and maybe a year-to-year basis. But over a 5 year and 10 year period of time, it's really not as scary. And this is actually an interesting slide. It shows you that diversification and all that. And it kind of shows you that despite all these, and there's different charts it shows, but generally the gist of this is that the S&P 500 makes one return, but the average investor makes a much lower return. And this also shows you that with fund flows, that generally if everybody's selling, it's probably a good time to buy, and everybody's buying, it's generally a good time to sell. Because people always put their money into the thing that was good like the last few months and not necessarily thinking about the things that are not doing quite as well. So this is actually, I thought, was an interesting slide, and it actually makes sense, and people kind of lose sight of this because they think about the market this and the market that. But really, over a long period of time, stocks go up because earnings improve, because that's basically what the stock market is. It's a bunch of companies making money. And there's really, over a long period of time, there's a strong correlation between the earnings of companies and actually, what they've, how they perform. When I go back to, I'm just thinking about this now. We go back to this slide which talks about the top 10 stocks going back in time. It's interesting little trivia question that I can ask people is that, how many of the top stocks in the year 2000 are still in the top 10? And I'm not going to, since everybody's muted, I will actually answer the question myself. You would think it's many of these top stocks, but there's actually only one. The only stock that is up is Microsoft. And it kind of shows you like the GEs of the world and the Exxon Mobil's and whoever was in the top 10 then, really don't keep that view. So you really want to be maybe thinking about the next stocks that actually could do well from there, and not necessarily think about what's done well for me in the past for that. So when we look at this, many investors follow their emotions. They get optimistic and then elation, and then they get nervous and fear. They get optimistic, and it's basically just makes sense to just come up with a strategy and just stick with it over a period of time. This is more of a long-term perspective that people can have, but it just shows you that, generally the market is very scary, but over a long period of time that people do really well by just having a long-term view. And a lot of people are saying to me, oh, I'll just put my money in a money market or a CD. But you just can see on this chart that putting your money in something like that is really not a great long-term strategy. This shows you that generally there's more bull markets than there are bear markets, and they generally do last longer. So again, you want to be in the market over a long period of time to make money for that. And again, markets reward discipline. This kind of shows you about all the horrible things that have happened over a period of time, and it generally makes sense to stick with it. And again, how markets respond to crises. It shows you that over a long period of time, after 1 year and 3 years and 5 years, it generally makes sense to invest in the market. And I realize I'm going through all this stuff very quickly, but the beauty of having this thing recorded, that if anybody ever, or somebody wants this presentation, I can send it to them, or they could just watch this recording later on, and you can study any one of these slides all day long if you want. So this is actually an important slide. It shows you about the impact of being out of the market, if you're fully invested in the market, or if you're missing the 10 best days of the market, you lose about half the rate of return. And if you miss the 20 best days of the market, you lose about 75% of the return. Unfortunately, most of these 7 best days occurred after the worst days. My son was actually asking me, oh, maybe I should try to time the market and try to get in and out of the market. I tried to explain to him that it's really hard to try to do something like that. And again, this is a similar chart that shows you if you miss a few days in the market, how it can dramatically impact your rate of return. And this is a similar slide that shows, missing the certain days in the market that you actually, that you're missing a lot of the return. Because a lot of people think they have a crystal ball, but there really is no such thing as that, where it's really hard to do that. And again, reacting can hurt your performance. So there's lots of slides that kind of show you all this. This is a different slide, which I actually like better because it more dramatically shows you. I guess it all depends upon the time period that you look at over here. But again, it's looking at the US stock market return of 9.7%, and the average investor made 3.4%. So what I tell people is most people buy high, sell low, and repeat until broke. So you just want to try to avoid. Then it shows you're basically not even keeping up with inflation over here for that then too. Barely keep up with inflation. And people also think that maybe I should invest in my home, but this also shows you that over a long period of time, a home is not necessarily a great investment. I look at it as more of a place to live. This is talking about some of the market patterns that are formed, and everybody talks about, the January effect. If the market is good in January, it'll generally be up, or go sell in May and go away. But generally, these are all, not really true. So it basically shows you that over a long period of time, you'd be much better off just sticking with it. So I'm going to show you this slide, and it's interesting, but the main thing to focus on with this slide is the contrast that you have between, the average large cap manager, and there's there is some difference between them, but not as much as you'll see when we get to the alternative investment managers that are available out there. So this is something to look at. Just so you can see there's some difference, but not a huge difference between those. The market, it shows you, generally the point of this is it shows the market has a history of ups and downs, and there's a whole lot more blue on this than there is red, which is the bear markets. And this is a similar slide that talks about generally the market goes up most of the time. And there's a huge distribution between these returns. It shows you that even though the market is up most of the years, some years it makes 10%, 20%, and sometimes even 20% in that. And that's why you want to have your money in all the different aspects of the market. This, for those who play blackjack, and I eventually sometimes play over there. It kind of shows you that blackjack is one of the better games to play, but they do build the casinos because the casinos win more than the people do over there. So it kind of shows you that is the market really like a casino? Like I said, like if 75% of the time you win by investing in the market, that is much better than all these other types of gambles that people take over there then too. And it shows you that over like a 10-year or 15-year period of time, the market is really a very, very, it does generally really well. Um, and this is actually why it's hard to generally beat the market. It shows if you took, the top 25% of performers each year and excluded them, you would actually have a negative return. I actually was reading something the other day that shows you that like 75% of the stocks in the market over the last 50 years have not even beaten treasury bills. So it's really hard to pick the winners going forward for that then too. And that's why you want to have pretty much a diversified portfolio because it's really hard to know exactly which one of the stocks are going to be the winners going forward for that then. Um, this kind of shows you the randomness of global returns. Um, I usually do in my seminar, I usually tell people to pick a number from 1 to 10. Then I tell you to double it. Then I tell you to add the number 8. Then I tell you to divide it by 2 and then subtract the original number. So when you do that, you then correspond it to a letter in the alphabet. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, D equals 4. And then I tell you to think about a country um, in Europe that starts with that letter. And then the next letter, I want you to think about an animal. So if those who were, I know I said that really quickly, but basically the answer to that is going to be Denmark. And the reason I tell that is because Denmark has actually been the best performing country in the last 20 years, and people really wouldn't know that. And the point is not to put all your money in Denmark. The point is that this is a really random chart to know which one of the best performers as far as that goes. This kind of shows you that right now, the stock market is actually fairly expensive and you're not getting much yield. So it's showing you over a long period of time that right now, the stock market is not necessarily forecasted to make a great rate of return going forward. But that being said, what I'm trying to add to people's portfolios, this shows you by adding a certain amount of alternative investments to people's portfolios. This is like the holy grail of investing. You end up getting a greater return and lower risk. So that's really why we want to add some of these alternatives to portfolio. And we'll see in a minute when we look at this, there's a lot of alternatives out there that we have available. There's venture capital, there's private equity, there's direct lending, there's infrastructure, there's transportation. And these things have generally greater yield and they don't really correlate much with the market. So we do want to add some of these things to the portfolio. This shows you all the yields of all these different things. And there's some interesting things out there where you can lend to companies right now and get really high rates of return, like 10.5% to 12%. And you can look at some other places over there to get something other than what you would get normally in bonds right now. Now, when you look at this I find to be really important because everybody now talks about the stock market, the stock market. And this kind of shows you that there really are, very few publicly traded companies out there. I think when I looked last, it was like 4,500 publicly traded companies. And a lot of these companies are staying private longer. So you really do want to get access to some of these private companies. There's like 6 million private companies and I think 4,500 publicly traded companies. So you do want to have access to some of these other companies to get greater returns for that then too. Now, you remember that slide that I showed you earlier that showed you the dispersion of returns between investing in stocks? You can see, like in global private equity, between picking a really great manager and a poor manager, there's a huge disparity here, as there is in hedge funds. So that's why it's really important to pick, the best ones as far as that goes over there then too. So, and the reason why you want to add these to the portfolio is because there's very little correlation, which means they don't really move much with the overall market over there. So you want to So they basically, I'm not moving with the market. So like they'll zig when the market zags for that then too. So you want to be able to add these things in here. And again, they don't really move. Correlation is basically showing you how it moves with the overall market. When you look at this, you can see that long-term plans, if people are planning on adding more to these so-called alternative investments in private equity, venture capital, private debt, and things like that. So that's something that if anybody has any questions about, we can talk about adding that to your portfolios. Having direct real estate has very little correlation with the market too, so that's something else that makes some sense. And this is kind of showing you like the pension returns and allocations of corporate defined benefit plans and endowments, the so-called smart money of the Harvard and Yales of the world, and the FPL pension plans of the world. They're investing large allocations to private equity and hedge funds over there then too. So it's something that makes some sense. And this is kind of like the holy grail of investing, is showing you that by adding these alternative investments to your portfolio, you get greater returns and you get lower risk. So that's something that makes some sense. And again, what we're looking to do over here is kind of show you that over a long period of time, that you want to not try to pick to be the smartest person in the room and try to pick the winner all the time, because invariably these are changing frequently. I think it makes much more sense that I can keep people more involved if you have a diversified portfolio that kind of meets all your goals. So when we build the portfolio, what we're trying to do is you're trying to really look to see, can I meet people's short-term goals? Like when I look at people, they want to look, do they have a 2-year bucket that they can kind of get everything and take care of everything over there then too? Then their variable spending over 3 to 10 years, and then also look over a legacy. So you want to look at all those different things and look at this over a period of time, as I said, over a period of time, and try to meet all your needs that way. So that was like the what to do about the market at that particular point in time, which is basically stay diversified, don't panic, and you basically want to look at some of these other asset classes out there. Now, when we talk about retirement, one of the big risks that people have is longevity risk. What if you live to 120? And this kind of shows you that people are expected. First of all, there's a 51% chance that one spouse will outlive the other by 10 years, and it kind of shows you that couples, the average couple is going to live, 65-year-old couple is going to live to 93, and there's a 25% chance they'll live to 98. So as they say, there's some good news and bad news in that. The good news is you might live a long time. The bad news is your money might not last. So you want to be able to make sure you have enough money to make up for that longevity risk. And this kind of shows you, people in excellent health. It's pretty logical that people in excellent health actually live longer. And I have some software that can help to determine, if you're, in good, excellent health, if your parents lived a long time, if you smoked or didn't smoke, you basically would live longer. If your parents had great longevity, you were in excellent health, and you did not smoke. This is also interesting. It shows you that when you look at this, that it's not that wealthier people generally live longer. So if you have more money, you have more money for doctors and healthcare and things like that, and you'll generally live longer by doing that as well. Now, the other risk you have in retirement, so you have, like I said, longevity risk. The other risk is so-called point-in-time risk. So here is where it gets scary. And this is the thing that kind of goes against, like people will say, oh, what if I live to 120? Then it would mean you should take a long-term perspective and be, aggressive in the marketplace. But the scary thing about that is, what if you lose a lot of money right at the point in time when you have the most amount of money and you retire? So this is where you have to be scared about that. And there's something out there called the 4% rule, where this geeky guy came down from a mountaintop and calculated for 30 years. And he said, how much can you safely take out of a portfolio? 65-year-old couple with $1 million. And he basically came down from the mountaintop and he said, 4% is the amount you can take. Now, there's different debate in the financial planning press as to whether it should be 3.5% or 4.5%. But generally, that's something to look at. And the whole goal of this is really, when you start retiring, the whole goal is to not lose a lot of money in like the first 5 or 10 years, and so-called the retirement red zone. Or the other thing that you could do to avoid running out of money is that when the market invariably does have a little dip, you just take out a little bit less at that particular point in time. But I have software that kind of goes over all those different things and kind of shows you that, and it's something that is really important to look at. Now, this is just some pure math for people, and this is what people don't want to lose sight of. Like, you don't want to be super aggressive and say, "Oh, I want to get the S&P 500 and be super aggressive," because if you lose 50% in a year, how much do you have to make the next year? The math is 100%. So it kind of shows you, like, everybody said, oh, I lost a lot of money in one year and then I made it back. They might not even be back to where they started with all that because they had a big loss. So you really, when you get to retirement in the next, when you're ready to retire within 5 years before or 5 years after, you really don't want to lose a lot of money in the beginning because it makes it much more difficult. This kind of shows you the withdrawal risk you have, the debate in the financial planning press. Like I said, it goes from 4% to 5.8%, whatever, 2.73. But the whole goal of it is really to look at and see, look at your own particular circumstances, see how much you're spending, and try to work that out from there. And the long-term view is that you should be, okay, but you just want to avoid those losses in the beginning. Now, I'm going to skip this BetaVest presentation for now because this is something that I think it hammers this point home, but I'm going to just, in the interest of time, I will move forward. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. If not, I will move forward over here. So the other risk that people have is inflation risk. What if, and people don't really, they really don't know inflation until they actually can see it. But what I like about this is when I used to do a seminar in person with people, I would hand this to people. But basically, what is this that I'm showing you? It's kind of interesting. It's a stamp from 1975. And it shows you that a stamp back then cost 10 cents. Now, the big question, which I don't even know the answer to this, is what does a stamp cost today? I'm saying it's basically about 50 cents or something like that. So that kind of shows you that prices have gone up 5 times in something simple like a stamp. And what you have to do is you have to keep track of all those different things. And this kind of shows you, like, quart of milk, what that would cost, inflation risks. And this is actually an also interesting thing. Like, people talk about inflation and what the inflation rate is, but really it's probably when you get older, there's a CPI for elderly people because they spend a lot more money on healthcare. You can see the costs that are much higher. And really, it's not even this. It's really like your inflation rate is your own personal what you spend money on. So, but the point is that you have to, if you're not making money, you're falling behind. And people who are making 4% in a money market and inflation's 4%, you're really not getting ahead as far as that goes. Um, and this is, I think, a really important slide because it kind of shows you that what will $100,000 be worth in the future? You're assuming a 4% inflation rate in 30 years, that'll be worth $29,000. So it's kind of an interesting chart, and it kind of shows you that you really have to have your money working for you. So again, there's these countervailing things. Like I said, there's what if you live to 120? That means you should be aggressive. What about this inflation things? It means you should probably be invested in equities as well. But the countervailing thing to that is what if you lose 40% in the beginning? So it's kind of like you want to really look at it and try to balance things out to not lose money in the beginning, but yet still have enough growing with inflation and also growing, beating inflation and also protecting against you live for a long period of time. And this kind of also shows you the eroding purchasing power over a period of time and what would happen with that. And you really want to have something that's growing over there then too. And again, it shows you like everybody's own spending over here. People in different stages of their life, like if you're starting with a family, you're probably spending a greater percentage on housing and things like that and less on healthcare. But as time goes on, older people spend more money on healthcare. And again, you really want to look at your own personal circumstances to see what that inflation might be. So again, we've looked at longevity as one of the healthcare risks. We've looked at healthcare risk as well. We've looked at inflation risk, and we've also looked at point in time risk. So the other risk you have is, and this kind of shows you I found this a trip down memory lane. It kind of shows you like how much cars have cost over time. And I just got a car yesterday, so I can talk to people about that. But I got a used car, so. But anyway, and uh, and then it kind of shows you the price of a home, and it kind of shows you all these things are a lot more expensive. But wages have gone up a little bit, but again, you have to have something that's actually working. This I kind of kept in here. We have to update this for 2024 slides, but it shows you here that it's kind of crazy. Like the reason I picked 1975 because it was a really interesting point in time. It was actually after Watergate, after the Vietnam War, and the stock market was down like 40% at that particular point in time. And people could have just bought like treasury bonds at that particular point in time and thought they were making a really good rate of return. And they basically could have met their needs by investing in that. But the point is that over a long period of time, that's something that seemed like the safe investment. They had the dividend yield that basically shows you how much they would have made in earnings. It's a huge amount over this period of time, and the dividends they got have really compounded too. And the S&P 500 has also gone up a lot over there then as well. So again, it's something to keep in mind that you want to have something that's growing. And as I said, the S&P 500 or the stock market is just a bunch of companies giving you money and giving you a share of your profits, which is giving you greater dividends as time goes on. So, and this kind of shows you, again, healthcare costs is a big risk that you have. Um, and again, this kind of shows you that estimated an average healthy 65-year-old couple will need $315,000 to pay for medical expenses. And the important caveat here, this does not include long-term care costs. So for those of you who save money in health savings accounts and things like that, and people are putting aside their $8,300 a year, or $8,700 a year, this is something that, shows you that you have a lot of money you can save in these vehicles because you are going to spend a lot of money on these particular things. And again, there's a lot of rising costs when you have in retirement, and these are things like that we're looking at, and it's really important to explore all these different things. You have Plan B premiums, Part D, out of pocket, all these other costs, and the Medigap coverage as well for that. Then this kind of shows you based upon your age, you have different spending patterns, and it's really something to important to look at as far as that goes. And again, when you look at it, it's basically something that you want to look at. Now, as far as Medicare coverage, there's different things you can look at over here. People can either look at their Medicare Advantage plans, or they can have their Medicare supplements and things like that. I personally like to have choices in my doctors, so I would probably look at the getting a Medicare supplement type plan. But the problem with this is for a lot of my clients, like we try to balance it out by looking to do, we'll talk about in a minute about Roth conversions, but you're kind of penalized a lot by if you make a lot of money, you actually pay a lot more. Like you could pay, for example, $500 additional amount per month because you make too much money. And this, they usually generally look back like 2 years as far as that goes. So it's kind of like a balancing act. You want to look to do Roth conversions to a certain extent, but you might be paying more for your they call this the IRMA adjustment that you have over there then. So the other expense you have is long-term care planning options. And this is something that's people are under the illusion that Medicare covers long-term care, but they don't. So this is something to look into. And it shows you there's huge expenditures that people have long-term care that you really want to look at covering this. It can cost a lot of money, like $110,000 to $145,000, depending upon where you live. The other thing you want to look at is Social Security. Basically, if you take your Social Security early, you're getting a 25% discount on that. You're only getting 75% of your benefit. If you wait till your full retirement age, you'll get 100%. And if you wait longer, you will get 132%. And the key part is this 132% is compounded by inflation because you're getting a CPI adjustment on that. So it is something that generally does make sense. And some people will argue, well, I can make more money by investing in the market. And so there is some debate as to when you want to take Social Security, but I have software that helps to determine, what might be the best thing for your particular circumstances. And there are certain interactions that people have with their own particular circumstances, if their spouse has worked or not worked. And also, if you told me how long you're going to live, I can tell you what the right answer is as far as that goes. So it's something to look into then too. So and again, I have software, and I'm probably getting another software that's going to help to look at this. I have lots of different toys. I have two softwares that help to determine the optimal tax brackets that people should be looking at to take money out and where to take money from. And I have one Social Security software package, but I'm probably looking to get another one as well. And this kind of goes through the claiming Social Security decision trees and the considerations that people go through. And then I think we have a few people on the phone here who are concerned about this. It's also important to look at maybe doing Roth conversions. Most people on this call can't qualify for putting money in a Roth now, but anybody on this phone call can do a Roth conversion. That's something that does make sense to look into to see what you can have over there. So that's and again, a Roth could make sense. And I think some people who have the ability to put money in Roth IRAs or Roth 401ks could make sense. And it all depends upon your time horizon and also what you think tax rates in the future will be. So what people don't realize is that you have $1 million in your IRA and 401k. You think you have $1 million, but really what you have is an IOU from Uncle Sam that they can take at any point in time, depending upon whatever those rates are. So I think it makes sense. I personally think the tax rates, maybe not in the next 4 years will be lower, but I think in the next, I think in the next 10, 20 years, the tax rates will be higher. So therefore, it might make sense to do some Roth conversions. So again, the tax rates right now, because what Trump is doing is probably going to sunset. They're not going to sunset. They're going to keep the rates at what they are right now. And we talked about earlier about what that might do to the budget deficit, but that was from the seminar from a few weeks ago. So this is talking about putting money into a health savings account, why that's something that makes some sense. I think most people on this call are past the health savings account days for doing that, but I think it's the best thing since sliced bread because it's the only place in the Internal Revenue Code you get a tax deduction going in, it grows tax deferred, and the money comes out income tax free. So, and again, this is what I was talking about before, that even though people might complain about tax rates and what they are right now, they're actually historically very low compared to what they have been. So, and again, this is for those of you who have young people in your lives. This kind of shows you the advantage of saving over a longer period of time, saving earlier and consistently. You end up with a whole lot more money than if you waited to save. So this is actually a really important slide that shows you that. I think most people on this call are not in this realm, but if you know somebody who is, this is something you might want to share with them. So, so when we look at this, if anybody has any questions, let me know, and I will look and see. Does anybody have any questions?
No. No.
Do you have any questions?
Okay, well, I'm going to show you, since we went through that rather quickly, I'm just going to quickly go through this BetaVest presentation because I haven't shown this in a while, but I think it's important to kind of go through all this because it kind of hammers home the point. And they say life is lived forward but understood backward, and it kind of shows you here what you're looking to do over here, and it kind of shows you the different points in time, which I think is really fascinating. So kind of shows you invested in a large company stock, averaging 12% a year. What would you expect to make? Well, we'll skip over this part. We'll just get to the main gist of this. So when you look at this, it kind of shows you what is considered retirement success. Retirement success is basically that you have enough money to reach every goal you want over here then too. So it kind of shows you that you start out with a certain balance and you end up with enough money and the check to the underwriter bounces. But most people would consider that the money actually grows over a period of time. But retirement success is basically you get to do everything that you want to do in life. So that's what retirement success to me is defined as. And what you can control are your deposits and withdrawals. That's really the only thing you control. I can help with the asset allocation, but the market performance, the sequence of returns, is something you really don't have a lot of control over. So when you look at this over a long period of time, it kind of shows you, like everybody talks about the market and how you've done and how much money you made. There's a big difference between a lump sum buy and hold investor, as a periodic saver, and then as a spender. And for those of you who don't know who a spender is somebody who's in retirement who's not putting any more money into the market. They're considered spenders. So most of you on this call are going to be considered spenders. And with that, you can have the same investment, a lump sum $100,000 bought and held untouched for 10 years, and a saver putting in $10,000 deposit per year for 10 years, and a spender putting in a $100,000 original investment with annual withdrawal of 6% at the end of the year, with 3.5% annual withdrawal increases, just so people can look at that. And it kind of shows you, you can have the same, you have different portfolios all ending up making a 10% rate of return. That one, this one, you notice you lost money in the beginning, you averaged 10%. And this one, you actually made a lot of money in the front end and then lost money in the end. Again, the average is 10%. And then you had this one, which the average is 8. So the question I would normally ask was, what would you rather get? An average of an 8% rate of return, an average of a 10% rate of return? Most people would logically say, I'd rather get a 10% rate of return. But what this kind of shows you, that in these particular circumstances, that if you're somebody who kind of hits it just wrong, you can actually end up making more money with the 8% rate of return. And that's generally over here. If you lose money in the beginning, you end up doing worse than the person who made an 8% rate of return for that then too. So this is kind of showing you the different portfolios. And again, the spenders are the ones which really have it the worst over here then too. So so again, it's kind of complicated, but I think this chart and these slides actually show you why it's important not to lose money really in the beginning over here. So it kind of shows you that over here you'd end up between the difference between those. In case 3, you end up with a 6.1% rate of return versus 7.3. In portfolio D, you actually only made 8%, but you ended up with more money. So so here, does point in time make a difference? It basically shows you can invest at different points in times of market and get a completely different result. And you can invest there and you can look like a genius, and then you invest over here and it doesn't look so smart, but over a long period of time, it does make sense to invest in the market. And this I like to show people. So just indulge me for 2 more minutes here. This is a $100,000 investment for a period of 25 years, a 6% withdrawal rate, 3.5% inflation. And it kind of shows you over here, 8% withdrawal rate, 4.5% inflation, so a little bit more. And it kind of shows you all these different periods of time. So it all depends really upon when your birthday is. And in that instance, it kind of shows you, in this instance, in 1975, if you hit it just right and you invested in the market and the market was going up 20% a year, you could have $2.6 million. But if you hit it just wrong, you could run out of money in 1966 to 1993 and run out of money in 20 years. So it kind of shows you, it depends upon the point in time that you're investing in here. And then you can look at this from the same perspective. If you increase the withdrawal rate and the inflation rate here, it kind of shows you that you end up with less money and you end up in more circumstances running out of money. So again, this is a thing you can control, your withdrawal rate. And it kind of shows you that nobody really has control over the 25-year period of time that they're going to have towards retirement and what that might be. And everybody would say, oh, that's really too scary for me. I don't want to deal with that. Just put me a hypothetical 6% fixed investment. And what this shows you, they generally run out of money in 21 years. So being super conservative over a long period of time is not necessarily the right thing to do there then too. So, so when you look at this, it's kind of showing you the investor rate of return. And it kind of shows you have the same rate of return here, a buy and hold making 9.63%, ending value 989,000. And here it's a 6% withdrawal for 25 years. 7.3% compound rate of return. And again, it's the same S&P 500, but you end up with zero over here versus $989,000. So again, it all depends upon what you are. If you're a spender taking money out of the market, you could end up with a completely different place over there then too. So so this is something that I like to show, and I haven't shown this to people in a while. Kind of shows you that if you increase the withdrawal over a period of time, it actually, you have a much worse chance of success here. So so these are, and just investing in bonds over a long period of time, you actually, in a short period of time, you're fine, but over a longer period of time, you actually have a very, very poor chance of success. So being conservative is not necessarily the thing to do over there then too. So I think that that's basically what I wanted to talk about over there. So if anybody has any questions or comments, just let me know.
Very good.
Anybody? So I think we got everybody. We got some new people joining us over here. Well, it was nice visiting with everybody. And anybody has any questions, comments?
No.
I'll take a sip of my beverage, and if I don't hear from anybody.
Yeah, I'm good, Steve. Thanks.
Nice joining us, Dan.
Yeah. You said the last one was a few weeks ago. I must have missed the invite, or I don't know. When was it? When
It
were
was
those
3
few
weeks
ago?
It was 3 weeks ago. If you actually go to my website, for those of you on this call, if you just go to my website under heinwealth.com and you want to see it, you see the 2020 hindsight channel here, Dan?
All I see is you right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Share your screen.
I gotta share my
Yeah.
screen. Yep. Okay, let me go back to this. So you can see here, this is my website, heinwealth.com. Can you see that?
Yep.
Just go to the 2020 hindsight channel
Yep.
and you go Trump 2.0, what to do now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd have attended if I must have missed it. It might have come through the inbox, but I might not have been paying attention. I will look at the recorded version.
Yeah, so that's there. And that's a lot of information. I went through 80 slides in 45 minutes. So I realize it's an impossible amount of information to process, but I just assume that people, if they really are interested, will stop on any one thing and can study it for as much as they want over there then too. So,
Excellent.
but yeah, thank you all for joining us. And I will, like if anybody wants to stay on the line and visit, we can do that. But I'll see you at home, Lisa.
See you at home.
Okay.
Take care, Steve. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay.
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Steve.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks a lot.